This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results. Are you ready to feel the power?
Sounds good.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the square dance, the Lost Scan square dance. I'm just kidding. I don't even know how to square dance. But I will tell you this, Kyle, I hope to God you've seen this guy. Have you seen the dude in the blue shirt that is the clogger that is like all over Instagram Reels and TikTok and everything? Long hair, mullet. Yeah. Hey, by the way, did some research. First name, Jeb. J-E-B. I don't even know why I looked it up. I mean, I knew that guy's name was Jeb from looking at him. But here's the thing. I sent him a $1,000 check in a Florida Risk Partners t-shirt and told him that if he would do a 30-second just flat out hammer in the clogging session wearing an FRP t-shirt, he could and send it to me. He could cash the check for $1,000. We'll see what happens. I guarantee you that we go viral with that. Everybody loves watching that dude just clog his way around wherever he's clogging.
Speaking of square dancing, though, like one of the most ridiculous things is that for whatever reason, that's like something that you learned in elementary school. Like you had a square dance day.
Yes.
At PE. Like you don't learn shit about like anything important. You just learn how to square dance. Like no taxes, no insurance stuff, none of that.
Can't even use an ATM. Don't know how to balance a checkbook or fill up your car with gas for that matter. No. Like I've gone through all of this.
But you can square dance your ass off though.
That's good. Well, you know what? That sounds like a lot of people who come into the insurance industry and they just really don't even know where to start. They don't have the tools. They got some life experience and some general worthless knowledge, but you really have to set yourself up with the right stuff to be able to go out and call on new business. And then once you do, demonstrate value on the front end. And so before we diverged and started talking about, various rustic dance forms, we're in the middle of the introduction of the podcast. So today we have Mr. Scott Knowles, formerly of Modgic, that has got a brand new technology that he has developed, not even just for producers, man. I mean, I look at what Scott's doing with Lost Scan and I'm like, there are so many applications to business in general for this product that it's a no-brainer. This is something that's been needed for a long time, and I'm not going to waste a bunch of time sharing my opinions. I can sprinkle those in as we're recording. But Scott, why don't you, it's been a couple years since you've been on. Why don't you give everybody sort of the quick update of where you've been and what's going on, and we'll roll from there.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been kind of a whirlwind ride for me. I mean, we obviously met first when I was the owner of Modgic and went through that acquisition, which was a lot of fun. I had a great time going through that, and life's changed a little bit. I've had a couple of years to kind of step back and figure out, what's next for Scott and what can we bring to the insurance market. So, we spent a lot of time in the quote unquote off season, so to say, trying to figure out, what should we do next. And, just so happened that while we were developing Modgic over the years, we constantly heard, a problem. And it was, hey, is there any way we could get information off loss runs? It's always, no, that's just impossible. It's something that sounds great, but it's kind of a pie in the sky opportunity to try to tackle it. And we eventually came to a point where it's like, hey, let's see if we can't do something with this. And luckily, I have an incredible partner who is a mastermind behind the keyboard and in the back end, he's come up with just an incredible AI system that's going to just change the industry, in my opinion. I think it's just huge opportunities, not only just in the insurance market, but like you said, I mean, we can literally roll this thing in just about to anything. So it's really, really cool, and we're excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, what you guys are doing every time, like, I swear, man, this is 100% the truth. Almost every single time that I get up and speak anywhere in public, one of the very first things I say is, why do we accept a lack of reciprocity from our carriers, right? Because when we go out and we go to market, we are required to do what? Put information into a standardized application. And that application is the standard for the entire insurance industry to use when you make a submission. And you even have to have your client or prospect, maybe at the time, sign that. And that's an official record, right? And if you don't have that, you don't get to bind coverage. You know, you might not even get a quote if that information is incomplete. But there's never been a standard for how we get information from the carriers as agents, right? Why hasn't there ever been a standard format? Why can't Accord come out with something that is a standard loss report format that everybody should get, right? And I'm not here to say, hey, go talk to your big eye or everything else and lobby Scott out of business. But I mean, you're solving a problem that likely is not ever going to get solved on the agency side. And that is, we get crap from a bunch of different carriers, and we get tons of different, I mean, I've had accounts where I've had 100 pages of loss runs that I had to go through to even start making sense of what I was going to get into, whether or not we were qualified to help them. And there's no real way to do that, right? If you're savvy, you might have some sort of OCR technology that you can scan in, but it's not dialed in, and it's not going to map correctly unless you really, really are way down the road in terms of your technical abilities, in which case I might recommend maybe going into a job selling software or something instead of insurance. But you're solving that problem, man. I mean, when you showed it to me, that's the first thing I said. Holy crap, how much easier is this going to make my life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, it's just like where everything, I would say, where's there a problem, right? And, you know, understanding that this is a huge problem in the industry. I mean, there is no centralized hub that carriers have all agreed to, which would be, I mean, that would be the biggest one. If we get all the carriers to like come together and say, there's a centralized place that we all can distribute our loss runs, right? Maybe that's our big picture down the road of what we could potentially do with the software. If we can develop something that, you know, houses this information in the correct format, protects it, and allows people to share it properly. I mean, who knows where that could go? But the reality is as of right now, you're not going to get that consistent agreement amongst all of the different carriers. So what's the next best thing? Well, everybody sends out loss runs. You can get a loss run, right? The problem is just like you said, you can take it and you can shoot it online through an OCR PDF to Excel converter. You're going to get all the data there, but it's just a mess. You know, you can't, there's no real validation of what's what. And in many cases, those OCR systems, what they do is they actually combine the information. So it doesn't know where you need to separate, you know, the name, where the title of the name is, you know, the claimant, and then the actual claimant name. So it says claimant name, all combined into one. It also won't separate the first name, last name necessarily. And it's not going to put it in a place where it's like, these are all the claim numbers, these are all the claimants, this is all the paid losses, so forth, so on. So, you know, the real issue that we have is, how can we get this stuff off of there? And what's the easiest way for us to do that? Now, there's a couple other systems out that are attempted to do it, but from what we've seen, they're just not validated the way that we validated our system so far. I mean, we've created something that is just absolutely incredible. The way that it actually runs, manages, it can find the information. We're also doing this all right here in the USA. You know, we're not sending anything off, you know, overseas to have, you know, a bunch of people on the back end try to code to each individual loss run. We built such a dynamic system that, you know, we don't actually have to build a code for Travelers, build a code for ICW, build a code for whatever new loss run may come in and come out. We've created this great community application that allows us to quickly map the information and give you the results that you need to be able to do whatever you want with them. And, you know, like you said, Dave, when we were talking about it the other day, it's, you know, how can I take this information and quickly prepare something for my clients and present it to them in a format that they understand, you know? And we've had so many, I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, since we've just announced this on LinkedIn, we have had just hundreds and hundreds of people who are jumping onto our beta, which is fantastic, number one. But number two, I've been doing beta discovery calls. And during that, we're just coming up with even more bigger ideas. And so like you said, you know, what's the consistency of loss runs? How can I get consistent loss runs? So through our calls, we realize that there's an extra need here of taking this information once we have it in our system and be able to actually present loss runs, recreate loss runs that have, you know, from ICW, Travelers, Hartford, whoever it may be, but put in a consistent format. So when it's being presented to a client, you're not jumping from one format to the next, trying to find the information and present it properly. We're going to create essentially your own custom loss runs that you can export out of the system and view in a PDF, let alone the other formats that we're going to be able to export in. So there's just really some really cool, phenomenal ways that we're going to address this marketplace and just provide so much efficiency to the brokers, to the carriers, and to the community itself. So it's pretty exciting.
I have to believe, I'm not even going to say this is what you wake up thinking every morning. I just know that if I was you, you know, the way that I think right now, knowing what the limited amount that I know and what the limited amount that I've seen of loss scan, I would be waking up every morning in your bed thinking to myself, number one, why am I in Scott Knowles' bed? But number two, I would be thinking, oh my gosh, how much more powerful would Modgic have been if I had this then? Like, because what I see from this is, you know, you have the ability to take what we do with loss scan and integrate it with mod auditing software and completely remove the necessity to manually key all of this stuff in. And I don't want to, like, number one, I don't know if this is what Scott's idea is, so there's no NDA or anything. I'm just telling you how my mind works. But I mean, anybody who listens to this podcast knows that one of my biggest gripes about the scanning technology with any mod auditing software is it's only for scanning in the actual mod worksheet itself. What good does that really do you if the data on the worksheet is bad, right? You have to have loss runs to validate, or you're not doing a mod audit. You're simply using technology to create great reports from information that might not be 100% accurate, which means I'm going to clean your plow at the point of sale when I take the time to manually key it in and do it the right way. The only option that we have right now that is somewhat cost effective would be to train a virtual professional to do this for you and have them start doing all the data entry into experience modification factor audits. But even then, that's a little bit cumbersome. And I'm also the type of person that I like to do the data entry myself because I'm intuitively picking up on trends as I'm keying things in just by reading all of the descriptions and things. But from a productivity and an efficiency standpoint, as a producer, if I'm the one that's having to do this, if I had the ability to take loss runs from for a loss period, 3 different carriers or whatever the number is, but scan those in and let it pre-populate with the injury codes and the reserves and whether or not it was open and closed and all of that, and then push a button and have it go and take me to where I need to enter in the premiums by class code or payrolls by class code or whatever the next information is. Premiums by class code, I think, is what it is on the worksheet. I always get it confused. But and then enter that in, and then boom, hit a button. And now it's taking me to, here's what the mod is based on the loss data that you've provided. You know, here's the top loss drivers. And then look, even take it a step further, like, cause we're not far away, man. There's different components to all of this stuff out there. And it's kind of like the big race everybody's doing with CRM and AMS on a smaller scale, because not every agency is that ingrained in doing stuff with experience mod and loss runs at that level. But we're almost at a point where I can see that we can have a product like Loss Scan that you could have from a very beginning to an end, complete loss analysis with all of the reports, all of the other things you need to go back and look. And truthfully, probably package that in a way that it becomes really, really powerful in the event that you're going to actually submit that piece of business to underwriting, because now they got it all there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just so many different opportunities that we can, look at when we're talking about, what the loss data can do and where it can go. So part of the system that we're developing and building out, it will actually have the capability of building in APIs. So we have many carriers, we have other software companies who are talking to us about building us a direct API. So when you go to export the information, you can literally go through and select the loss data that you want, and then select your export, mode, whatever it may be. Now, in many cases, like for instance, with Modgic, what we had an Excel spreadsheet that you could import in the system. Well, we'll reach out to, obviously the current owners of our software and reach back and say, hey, look, we'll go ahead and develop an export that can be imported directly into your system. So our intention is to make sure that we're working with the Applieds, with the Zywaves, with, whoever it may be out there, and making sure that we're building the necessary tools to direct it in. Now, as we've gone through this process, we're already working with some carriers where, in an instance where you want to take your information and send in your submission, you'll actually be able to take a loss run and drag it and drop it directly into, for instance, give you an example, it could be Travelers or whoever it may be. They may have a little box that you drag and drop a loss run in. In the back end, it'll actually run right through our system, decode all the information, and import it right into there, so underwriters can quickly and easily analyze a risk. I mean, that's really the big thing for them. On top of that, our hope is down the road, we'll be able to benchmark. So you'll be able to benchmark not only your information that you have in the system, but also globally. We want to make sure that we're giving the capabilities and the value to our customers for what this data really can do for them. Obviously, in a case where we're doing it at a high level, we'll never go down to a business or a broker or individual like that, keeping everything high level. So if you want to do a search in California and say, hey, what does a car dealer look like in California, right? So we could actually show the analytics on a benchmark basis of what's going on with that particular type of risk that's out there. So I think dynamically, there's just a million ways that we can take this. The thought process of doing reports and such, I really thought long and hard about whether or not we're going to go down that road. There are so many different softwares out there that can provide those types of analysis that we don't necessarily want to compete against. We simply want to give the platform to take the data from one point and put it into another port to where that data is now usable. And so that's really our primary focus right now. However, there may be a possibility in our roadmap that we could potentially post on different charts and graphs that you could build out based on the data, and then you can pull those charts and graphs right out of our system and then put it on your documents. So we wouldn't really be creating quote unquote reports necessarily, but more or less the data and direct analytic information that you need to be able to present whatever thought process you have to a particular customer. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, you could even take it further if you had a content library, because that's one of the things that I've always talked about, whether it be cobbling it together using like a Modgic prior to your exit with a Mineral or a KPA, or whether you use Zywave with Broker Briefcase and, their ModMaster tool. You can't just go in with the diagnosis. You also have to provide the treatment plan in order to be effective in closing business. And this is just another way, like you could literally create this thing so that when those reports are generated, tags are developed from keywords in the top loss drivers that then are used to pre-populate content as suggested resources.
That would be legit.
So literally you're taking a producer who's never done a mod audit and say, hey, Johnny, all you have to do is scan in the loss runs and key in a couple of numbers for premium by class code, and you're golden, man. It's going to give you everything you need to do to go out and sell the account. And if you really want to take it to another level, instead of taking them directly to where they download the actual PDF of that information, take them to a landing page where they can download it, but also have a video of somebody who's actually been there, done that, explaining to them how to use that resource, and maybe even have a downloadable talk track around it for the point of sale. So it's not just as simple as, download this and go hand it to somebody. You do really have to have some talking points around it. But if you think about it, man, I mean, I realize that we're way off the subject of what LawScan is trying to do right now, but I'm looking at this thing from a global perspective, and you could really put some great things together. Now, I have been accused before by the CEO of a major insurance software company of not being forward thinking or thinking I didn't know what I was talking about. So discount that, Scott, because, that might just be completely something that's unrealistic, but I don't necessarily think that it is, because we've already got the components. We just have to connect them.
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, in my opinion, when it comes to like software solutions, right? I mean, because software solutions, the reason we have software today is because of people like you who are out in the field who understand what the need is, right? If you're not out there, you don't really understand the need and the value of what you can create. I mean, the lucky thing with me is being in the industry for 25 years as a producer. I was in there fighting, doing everything I could possibly do to grow my book of business, right? I understand it. So when you look at other software companies, the ones that are developing products, right? They don't understand. They don't get the mentality of a producer. They don't get the mentality necessarily of the industry itself. They're just somebody who's out there says, hey, here's an idea, let's build this. And what happens is that's where you see these software solutions that are they're just ugly. There's so many ugly software solutions that don't understand how a producer's mind works, how an underwriter's mind works, right? So to have that capability and to also go through this process for me personally of building a software company, spending 10 years turning it into what it was, and then having it acquired, and that entire process, the back end, everything you need to know on how to run a company like that, and then turn it into something successful, gives us a huge leg up in the industry. So we already know with what we have, I mean, we're literally sitting on this incredible golden nugget that's going to explode. And my main goal, I mean, when we think about, what's the problem? And with everything, it's always like, what is the problem? Where does our solution? And there's really three problems that are in the industry. Number one is the most important and valuable thing that all of us have: time, right? Nobody can give you back time. The time is there. The amount of time you spend equates to what? Money, right? So time and money always go together. But third, and most importantly, when it comes to this particular instance, is also accuracy. Because even though you could have somebody spend the time, which is going to cost you money to have it, completed, the question is how accurate is the information, right? So that's really the three keys when I look at the software of what we're solving for the industry is how quickly can we get information in and give you the results out? During our discovery calls, I was having one, I was asking them, I always ask the question, I say, well, what's the value for you? Where do you feel as though, the value is? What would you pay for the software? And it was talking to, a manager and an underwriter, and the manager linked to the underwriter and said, well, how much time do you spend doing this per month? And she goes, well, I spent 80 hours last week. And so when I asked, I said, well, I want to know what you'd pay for it, right? Because we need to build out our pricing platform, figure out, what is reasonable for the marketplace. And, her response was, well, take an underwriter salary and you just got the amount of time it takes. So there's your value. And guess what? It's actually more valuable than that in our mindset, even though we're not going to go down that road, because that 80 hours gets turned into 10 minutes, right? Because it takes us literally under 1 minute to take an 80-page loss run, extract all the data out in a perfect format that you can then utilize in any software that you want to. I mean, there's massive value behind that. And the accuracy, it's perfect, because we're using real PDFs and we're scraping that information right off of those. So
well, and the other thing too, Scott, this, man, from a human error perspective, number one, 100% chance that if I have more than about 3 or 4 pages of loss runs, there will probably be at least one transposition of numbers, because my ADHD is going to take over and I'm just going to start thinking about what's for dinner, or I wonder what the kids are up to at school while I'm in the middle of doing it, or, any number of things, right? But the other part of that too is, even if you were to go and train like a virtual professional and outsource this to them, there's some loss runs that are out there that are relatively, I don't want to say they're overly complicated, but if you don't know your way around like a variety of loss runs, instead of just the carriers you deal with, you could make mistakes, because there's a lot of people that will include the expense load within the medical and indemnity, and we know that has to be extracted because it's not used to calculate the mod. And so there may be some level of manual math that has to be done before you know exactly what amount you're supposed to add in and all of that stuff. And I think, just from the ease of knowing that once, and this is me understanding how your system works, right? But knowing that once that loss run is mapped, unless there's anything that changes with, materially with how those loss runs are constructed and then sent to you, you don't ever have to mess with it again.
No, for sure. Yeah. And, and that's really the big key here is, how can we solve that problem? I mean, the great news is we solved it. I mean, we literally have solved it. All we're doing right now is we're literally building our UI behind the system itself. Obviously, we have an incredible algorithm that we've built and developed. And here's the other thing. So, and because a lot of the other companies out there, the other companies that I know of that are doing this, is there's really 3 different systems that will extract in our OCR systems that people can run them through. You can run them through, Google has one, so forth, so on. So there's different ones that you can run it through and try to extract data and figure out which one's going to give me the best results of the scan. We're not doing that. We've created our own system. We've created our own mapping system. We've created a community mapping system too, which I want to get too deep into it right now, but as we begin to release that, it's going to be pretty incredible. It's not going to stop anybody from waiting for us to map any loss run ever. You'll always have the capability of getting that information instantaneously. And David, I don't know if this is something that, would be, just try to get your thought process on this, because this is something else that we've been considering as well, as kind of creating this verified repository, so to say. So you as a producer, you download your loss runs into our system. We extract the data. We now give you a link. That link you can send with your submission to an underwriter. Within that link, the underwriter can click on it. They'll get your verified loss runs or a unified loss run and an Excel spreadsheet that they can take and manipulate the information. But we'll actually be considered a verified loss run housery. So in other words, that link will show them images of the loss runs that have been imported in the system. It'll show the resulting data. So if the underwriter wants to go back and forth and check and say, hey, are these real? Is this real information? We can essentially become that repository. So it solves a ton of problems for your submissions. It's like the underwriter gets it. They have all the information that they need right there in front of them. Potentially, they've got a streamlined loss run that they don't have to go through and manually enter into their system, because we've given them the data, and or we build that API that would just boom, shoot right in and allow them to grab it. We may even create like an API Dropbox, so to say, that an underwriter can go in and grab the information right out of there and utilize that information. The use cases are really just, all over the place. Risk managers have been contacting us, TPAs have been calling us, MGAs, carriers, brokers. Everybody in the world has been reaching out to us and trying to figure out, okay, we want to participate. We want to figure out how we can do this. Give us the tools that we need in order to implement into our system and create these direct APIs. And so that this is just streamlined down the road. And so, the use cases are just unreal, and the problems they're solving are, I can't tell you how excited I am. I'm super stoked. It's not even a sale. It's quite interesting, because this isn't something that we even have to sell, because it's just something that is so deeply needed in the industry. And we feel like we can really make a huge difference and change, with everybody, as we begin to push out this product. So.
I definitely see it as a game changer for sure. I know, David, you messaged me, I think it was last week, and you were like, dude, this new thing that Scott's got going on is ridiculous. And I don't remember what it was that you told me, like what one of the features was. And I was just like, damn, like that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think, and we haven't talked about this yet, but you and I talked about this earlier. I was on a coaching call with some producers, but the other area that this helps you with is identifying weaknesses in that client or prospect's game, right? Because we all know that if we'll get loss runs, we'll go to manually key the information into the mod auditing software. And as we do, the loss runs are like incomplete, right? Really crappy description of the accident, or you don't really have the right body part, or a specific enough body part, or maybe it'll say laceration, but you don't know what they were doing, or whether they were, handling a piece of equipment. You don't know the cause of injury. You don't know all of the things that you need to really put together a just locked down mod analysis. A lot of the times that stuff's not there. And so you have the ability to then scan all this in. And again, you're not going to have to sit there and read page by page by page and get through all of the crap that's not relevant to you, making sure you have a complete set of information. You can scan it in and very easily identify all the areas where you don't, so that if you're, again, producers, listen to what I'm telling you. So if you go in to meet with somebody that's a prospect after they've given you loss runs, and this is part of you doing your analysis for them, you can ask them the question, talk to me a little bit about accident reporting. What's your policy for your company? Because here's what I know. The overwhelming majority of the time that we get bad loss runs from a carrier, it's not the carrier's fault. It's the fact they didn't get the information on the front end. And that's your client or your prospect's issue because they don't have a process. It's your issue if it's a client because you didn't bother to help them create that process and then put the accountability in place to make sure it's there. But for prospects, you can go in and ask these questions very quickly and it's low-hanging fruit. And again, now you have the ability to do that. If you've got the right tools like a Mineral where you can create the handbook and the safety manual in a formal company policy that says, look, we need to get rid of lag time. Well, you need to report any incident. I didn't say injury. I said incident, which includes injuries, 20, within by the end of your shift on the day that it happened, right? Or at the very latest within 24 hours. Anything longer than that, you're at risk of disciplinary action. Because I think that when people get injured at work, the employer's left holding the bag in their mind, thinking we don't have any power out over this. Well, you don't have any power over it because you didn't have a policy in place to hold these people accountable to. It's just like when people, and you know this, Scott, it's just like when people get, released for light duty or we're trying to get them to MMI on a workers' comp claim and the employee's missing work. They're not calling out. They're not letting you know when their doctor's appointments are and everything. Well, why do they do that? Because you don't have a policy that you can hold them accountable to and enforce. Employers are not helpless when you have an injured worker if they have policies and procedures in place and hold people accountable to following those. They have issues because none of that exists, which is why you need to be more than just a policy placer / order taker when you're going out for new business. You need to be able to identify these problems and offer solutions.
Yeah, I think that communication on the front end is what we talk about a lot of times. And I could see employees being, if they don't know what the proper procedure is, being afraid to, maybe report something because they don't want it to come back on them and, be looked at negatively. And then they sit at home and somebody else starts talking to them and they're like, you need to do this or you should get paid for that. And then it turns into this whole big mess that it really didn't need to be if it was just communicated effectively on the front end.
Yeah, I mean, the average person, when they get injured at work and have a workers' comp claim, it's the first time it's ever happened to them.
Right.
We talked about that with Kevin Ring when he was on. It's the first time it's ever happened. They don't know what to do. They're scared to death. They think it might be their medical insurance that they're going to have to pay for. And well, we talk about this too. If you have a high mod, you probably need to ask about that company's benefits because they likely suck. And you've got a bunch of Monday morning comp claims because people don't have money to fund their deductible or they're out of pocket. And I think that's a natural thought process when somebody has an injury at work too. Everything that we're talking about boils down to culture. That's it, period. End of story. Policies, procedures, how you implement them, how you revisit and train them, how you communicate them. That all has to do with having a culture of insurance and risk management in your agency. And if you don't have that, that's what producers need to be doing with their agencies. We're in a time right now where every single person out there is shopping, period. Doesn't matter how long you've had the relationship, doesn't matter how good that relationship is. Every single client that you have is looking for relief in some way, shape, or form. You very likely will retain those accounts, but they will feel better for keeping you honest. And here's what I'm going to tell you. That also means that if you have a single weak link in your armor, somebody who doesn't is going to be able to come in and exploit that. And you better be out in front of all of this stuff. And again, tools like Loss Scan are for it. They're going to help you. I always say producers, loss runs are not just for submissions. They're for you to get the history and the story on an account and know what's going on before that submission ever happens. If you're going into meetings and you don't have loss runs when you're trying to close a deal that you can ask questions from about lag time, subrogation, open claims, light duty return to work, all of the things that we blast on this podcast all the time. What are you really talking about? I mean, you need to have all of this information so you know what questions to ask when you go in.
It's funny. I think that when you talk about some of the things you're bringing up, I mean, technology that we have today in the marketplace, there's tons of great technology out there, right? It's the question of how does a good agent utilize it, right? So it all starts at the house, right? The broker themselves, the ones who are really successful, who have high retentions, are those who already have this plan in place. Because the reality is in that scenario, right? You have all these different carriers who, a lot of them have risk control services. They have applications, internal ones that they built. But if you're going to move a client from one carrier to another carrier, that changes. So if you can't create this consistency internally, your process that you use day in, day out, so that that customer doesn't feel the strain of like, oh my gosh, now I have to go through a whole new carrier to figure out what does their claims process look like, right? And that's where the centralizing of all the different applications and your internal processes as a broker become so valuable. So if you don't have that in place, when that customer has those claims, they know whether it's now or 10 years from now, the process that you established is always the same. It's always going to do what it needs to do because you have built essentially this machine to be able to manage the claims. And that's where, like, for instance, like, I mean, our friend Jess Dance with Zenderies, like, I love Zenderies, you know, Jess and I talk all the time. We have our little, you know, back end thing. We go back and forth and chit chat about just about everything in the world. And, you know, he's a great guy. He's built an incredible company, in my opinion. And he's got just he's solving some big problems, which revolve around exactly that claim process. So, you know, I love technologies like that. One thing that, you know, I'm going to focus on, aside from LawScan, is I really want to create kind of an atmosphere and a community around the technology that drives the insurance industry. InsurTech today, the way that it's been running, right? 10 years ago when I started Modgic, I mean, InsurTech was just barely on the map. Look at it today. It's just been growing, and there's all sorts of new ideas and technology out there that's driving these ideas that are mostly coming from producers, the people in the field who understand where the problems are, and they're trying to figure out a way, how can I solve it? So one of my goals is not just to continue to move forward with LawScan, but also potentially have my own podcast to talk about nothing but InsurTech that is available for producers. So keep posted. Don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm talking to a couple other individuals out there who are software guys in the InsurTech industry that I think would be a huge value to be able to bring to light some of these softwares, much like you do, David. I mean, primarily, I think the focus here is, you know, how can you help producers produce, right? That's your goal. You need to figure out how to do that, but also bring all the technology behind it in a different story. Will be a lot of fun too. So.
Yeah, you know, I think you need to hook up with Jason Cass, and you just reminded me. I talked to Cass last week, and I meant to send an email introducing the two of you, so I'm going to. But he actually has an event. I'm not going to call it a conference because it's more of an experiential event called the InsurTech Showcase that he is launching for the first time this year. And I think that there's I want to make this delineation because I think that a lot of times when agents talk about InsurTech, it's all encompassing. I think there's two different kinds of InsurTech. Actually more than that. There's the InsurTech that is basically designed to try and remove the middleman, right? And get the producer out of the way. Then there's the InsurTech that's designed to make our lives easier. And that's also designed by software companies that might likely have never, you know, stepped foot into an agency, but had an idea and hire some consultants. But then there's that group of technology that Cass classifies as indie tech, that is technology of agents, by agents, for agents. It's people who have walked a mile in the shoes and realized these problems are out there, just like you did with Modgic, just like you're doing with LawScan, but it's a much more educated approach to pushing something out there because you actually felt the pain that the need or that the software solves when you were trying to produce. And as a result, decided, you know what? I'm just going to invent something that'll make this better. And so I actually really, really like a lot of the indie tech things that are out there. You see a lot of really, really smart agents that are coming up with these ideas. I mean, Todd Tams has built Mod Advisor. David Watson has built Risk Advisor. You know, Peter McDonald has built Wonderwrite. I mean, I can go on and on and on about all of this stuff that's there, but my goodness, some of the best technologies that we're using at Jess is another one. Zenderies, another indie tech guy. These technologies that are getting built by agents should not be overlooked or discounted. People, you know, I would much rather have an agent that's a resourceful and forward thinking and smart enough to even just come up with the idea and begin the roadmap of this process, who knows they need to outsource development and everything else, but to ultimately make it a really good product. than deal with some software company that's trying to understand insurance. And that I'm not poking at anybody specifically. I'm just saying in general, there's a lot of companies out there that were software companies that decided they wanted to get into the insurance space. And now that's where we are. It's a different dynamic when you have somebody who's in the insurance space that wants to develop a software product, because they have felt real pain on the streets and they're much more convicted about getting that solution to market, in my opinion.
Oh, totally. Well, I mean, you look at, for instance, like Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce is a great example of a software. It's a kind of a cookie cutter box, right? And way back in the day, you know, when Salesforce was out there, I always wanted to go to Salesforce and say, just hire me, just hire me so I can show you what the insurance industry needs so you can actually build this thing instead of making me sit here and try to build it myself. And it took them forever to finally do it, to finally create some sort of, confluency that works extremely well in the insurance industry. I don't even know if it does. I mean, I don't touch, Salesforce that often. I'm a HubSpot user, and I love HubSpot to death. I think it just solves so many problems for me personally, from a software standpoint. And I think it's a great fit for the insurance industry as well. But man, there's just a lot of opportunity out there. And honestly, David, I think one of the problems that you have in this industry is you have all these great minds. And what I mean by that is you've got producers, the people out in the field, you've got carriers, you've got brokers, underwriters. It doesn't matter who they are, but they may have an idea. The problem is they don't know how to fulfill the obligation, take it to the next step. They're too scared. They're too afraid. They don't know what the cost is going to be. They don't know how to really plan it out. And then they haven't been through it before. So they don't know what they need to really take a software that's an instance and turn it into something that isn't, right? And so that also, brings up just another concept, which is I'd love to be able to have, kind of this centralized, tool or group of individuals who can actually advise, these agents who have ideas, create the ability to actually fund them as they take it down the road, finding the partners who can do that. But if we have something that's kind of pre-built out, it's like, hey, you got an idea that's in the InsurTech industry, bring it over here. Let's talk about it. Let's see how we can turn this into something that's really valuable, because most just don't know how to do it. You just you bootstrap it. That's what I did. But the problem is when you bootstrap, it takes you 10 years, like it did me, to finally get to a point to where it can be acquired, right? And even that wasn't my, objective with Modgic. I had no intention on selling that company. Sometimes there's things that are put in front of you that you just can't turn away from. And that just happened to be that instance. And, I'm very proud of what we created, and I'm proud of what I did, at that company to solve and fix a lot of issues that they had, on that side. So I feel as though, even their product has been improved, and we've helped because we brought new mind thought process into the systems of what it's going to be. So, the reality is that, there's just a huge need for individuals to be able to direct their energy. And maybe that's something I can help solve, through the podcast. And maybe it's something I can help solve in a totally different brainstorming way. I mean, Jess and I, we kind of created a group a while back, which included myself and Jess and a couple other software owners out there, and mind thought processes that we brought together. And we all would meet in our quote unquote mastermind group. And we meet in Texas, and we literally sat in the hotel room, and we had markers, and we just drew all over the windows and tried to think of, how can we solve these problems that we're seeing in the industry? How can we improve the flow? What can we do to really make this an easy process for producers, for our clients, for just underwriters, carriers? Doesn't really matter. But getting those minds in a room to be able to kind of throw those things against the wall was a lot of fun. I mean, and we actually came up with some great concepts. So.
Well, I'll tell you, man, one of the things that I see happening, I'm sure you see this too, and this goes back to my roots here in Tampa. I have been highly involved with the Tampa Bay technology scene, the Tampa Bay Technology Forum, the Tampa Bay Technology Foundation. The University of Central Florida has a massive technology incubator. We have the Technological Research and Development Authority over in Melbourne that is dealing with all kinds of technologies that are being spawned from the Department of Defense and the Space Coast over there. We have Tampa Bay Wave, which is a massive technology accelerator. And I've known Linda Olson, the lady who's the executive director of that, for a number of years. And the University of Florida, we have, not only just regular tech, but the Sid Martin Biotech Incubator has won worldwide awards. A lot of people don't even realize that the University of Florida is the second largest technology transfer organization in the entire world. And I've sat on these boards and I've worked with these companies and I've seen the resources that are given and the number of these companies that succeed versus those that don't have that ability. And they bring in, professional people to volunteer and be ad hoc board members for them. They give them the infrastructure and the office space they need to be a part of that. And, we did not have that for a long time in the insurance industry, specific to some of this indie tech and the InsurTech stuff, that we're talking about today. But, we've got, last week, for the last part of the week, I was in New York City and I went and met with David and Tony at InsurTech New York, and I learned about their accelerator and all of the different companies that are in there. And the fact that these guys both have exits from InsurTech companies, and they also have a VC fund that they're actively looking for investors in. If you're the right person and you're looking for a place to throw some coin, I would highly recommend you reach out to these guys. Then you've got, who's really got it all figured out is the big brokers, man. They know, they understand they need to invest in this stuff. And it's a heck of a lot cheaper than having their own R&D. But if they put something together like Broker Tech Ventures, where you've got some of these groups like my old stomping grounds over there at BRP and, Ron Assisi's place, I forgot, Horton Group. All of these are coming together. And so we're starting to see the industry take notice and realize, we probably should go ahead and figure out a way to nurture these companies so that we can actually see this technology not just get to market, but also thrive. Because as well as I do, the overwhelming majority of these ideas are going to fizzle out before they're ever cash flow positive on their revenue. And that's no different than the majority of the deals that you see on Shark Tank and all of these other places. TV glamorizes it and makes it look like it's easy. And just because Damon gives you, $250,000 for 43% of your company doesn't mean that your company is going to be successful. It still has a better than average chance of failing even after that. So that's what we need. I'm happy to see that you guys are doing that and you're creating these mastermind groups in an informal way, but I'm also happy to see a lot of formalization around what's happening in the industry and the support that the industry by and large is giving those people that are willing to take the risk and step out. Because at the end of the day, man, you had your exit. You didn't have to do this, right? You didn't have to come back and solve this problem for anybody. You could have just, at least I'm assuming you didn't, right? But I mean, from a financial perspective, you had no reason to come back and do this. You could have just sailed off into the sunset, lived a very comfortable life, and then been on your way. And so that tells me that, number one, you and I are wired very similarly, because I don't know that I'll ever be able to stop either. But, as long as there's a need, there's going to be people who are willing to meet it. We've been going almost an hour, man. I want to ask you one question. I'm not going to ask you anything that's going to put you on the spot, but this is a question that is not, I'm just going to put it out there. I have never had an exit at this point, right? So I haven't had an exit from the agency. Don't anticipate having one anytime, at least in the next decade or so, but I've never done that. You had 10 years of your life invested into a product, man, and you exited. To me, the closest thing, even though I haven't been through it yet, I know it's coming. I dread it every day. It's got to be like giving your daughter away as the bride on her wedding day, because you spent all of your life investing in this girl, right? And she grows up into this woman and she becomes attractive, and everybody, people want to date her. And eventually somebody says, you know what? I like you enough. I want to marry you. And now you are handing her over to another guy for the rest of her life, based on the nuptials that we all say when we get married. What were the emotions for you when you went through that, man? Was it a roller coaster? Were you happy? And then the other question I have, and you can choose to answer this as politically as you want, and it's not specific to the company that you necessarily exited to, but I'm interested in what that dynamic was like when you're like 6 months in and realized, you know what, this isn't mine anymore. It was a great deal. It was the deal of a lifetime. I needed to execute on it. You got over the initial phase where it's like, now what? At some point, the adrenaline rush goes away, and you realize, oh wow, I gotta ask permission for things or answer for things, and you may not have been in that dynamic. You may have had complete carte blanche. I don't know, because the details of your deal are none of my business, and we haven't talked about any of that. But I'm interested in the emotional aspect, because I gotta believe, man, that's just, while it's extremely exhilarating to get a nice chunk of change for an exit, there's part of me that has to believe that there's still some emotional turmoil you go through when you go through something like that.
So you said a lot, and I'm going to answer as best as I possibly can. So, you're right. It is like your baby, but what you really invest in, and I think what the hardest part about not only the decision that we made to sell, but the emotions that went through it were, your customers. They were really the most important thing to me. They were my investment. They were the ones who really believed in what we were doing, who really relied on us to bring them a product. So I think the most difficult thing was realizing that you are no longer going to have control over what you can and can't do for those customers. You made promises to those people to sell them, that you're going to do X, Y, Z, and you just don't, you're not going to have that control. So that to me was probably the most difficult part about the decision that we made, was understanding that how is this going to affect our user group? How is this a positive thing? Is this a negative thing? Is it just, status quo? And then what can I do moving forward to make sure that, I'm staying true to, our software and our promise and everything else. So to answer your first question, that was my baby in that sense. Were those customers, those people who really believed in me, they were my babies. And we always, when we ran the company, just like we will this one, is in the same mentality that our customer service is the most important thing that we can possibly bring. Because if you trip up on that piece and you don't fulfill those needs, if it takes you 10 minutes to get back to somebody, you just ruin those relationships, right? In my opinion, or I'm kind of falling true to what the rest of the industry does, which relies on tickets, right? I rely on people. And I think, one of my most important investments that I made into Modgic was having the software that we integrated in our system called Intercom, because Intercom allowed us to immediately solve problems and find out, where are the pain points, what are the issues. And so I had a requirement internally with the people I had hired to do my customer service who work for me to make sure that the amount of time it took us to respond to anybody, unless of course it was over a weekend or something like that, even then, I would actually respond, was under a minute. I wanted to make sure that nobody had to sit there and wait for an answer, right? And then using that time to listen to the problems and solve them through software. Because if you have to build out a huge customer service backend to support your software, you've got a problem with your software. You need to solve the problem to stop the phone calls. Nobody wants to be called unless they're calling you to say, hey, we love this, or I'd love to see this improvement or something like that. You don't want them calling and complaining, right? So those were some of the key things that were important to me. As far as I will tell you that the roller coaster ride, and it was an absolute roller coaster ride. People don't understand when you're selling a software company, there's something called discovery that you go through. Yeah. Discovery is unbelievably painful. It's like literally being beaten every single day with the same question over and over again, being asked it in different formats, different ways. And it was just, it gets so frustrating because it's like, look, we're a simple company. We made this a simple company. We don't even, this doesn't even have any sense, but it's just part of that process. And so going through that and not knowing, 1 second from the next, you think that, you've got everything laid out, and then you just don't know if at the last minute, what's going to happen. And I've talked to other friends who had software companies, and literally they went through the entire process in the last day. It's like, we're pulling the plug, right? And, for us, it was extremely difficult because we were selling to our direct competitor. So it's like, how much information do you give out, right? How can you protect yourself from making sure that you don't go through that process and they take out your guts and lay them on the table, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, see you later. We just stole everything from you. It's like, well, now we're screwed. Now what do we do? Right. So I will tell you that once it was a very painful process, but I was very pleased with the people I was dealing with who actually got it done. I did, by the time everything was said and done, I enjoyed, the people that I was working with. I enjoyed the opportunity that they gave me to improve another software, which was their ModMaster product, and to go in there and integrate the two and try to bring the two together in a newer platform. So, I'm proud of what I did over there. I feel as though we had a great impact, and at the end of the day, it's just. It's a great question. I mean, there's tons and tons of emotion and process that goes through that. But I remember, after we were acquired, there were a lot of people who were posting things, and I think David, I appreciate it because you actually stood up for us and stood up for me. People were saying that, well, why'd you gave in, and so forth, so on. And just another person out there who's trying to collect a paycheck. I got a family. Just like you got a family and everybody else, and I have to think about them at the end of the day. And I took a lot into consideration for it, and it wasn't easy, but I made the right decision and I'm happy with it. So,
well, I think I remember that phone call that you and I had at 8 o'clock in the morning, knowing it was 5 o'clock in the morning, your time, as if it were yesterday. And I remember telling you at the time, I'm happy for you, but I'm not happy, right? I'm happy for you that you have now changed your family tree. You've achieved the dream that you set out to achieve. And, truthfully, if anybody holds that against you, screw them, man. Seriously, screw them, because there's nobody at all that ever set out to build something great. And when they get it to the point where it's attractive enough that they can benefit financially in a very significant way from it, that's going to say, I'm a man of principle. I'm a lady of principle. I'm not interested. I did this for the greater good of the industry. Bullshit. No, you didn't. You did it because it met the need of something that you had a problem with. And you decided that at some point, you just weren't going to sell, right? Or the product sucked and it wasn't going to ever get anywhere. But anybody who's built anything worthwhile to where people are going to acquire it and truthfully didn't have any way to really perpetuate it beyond where it was, they're all going to do the same thing. Here's what I'm going to tell you, people, as we wrap up. We're like right at an hour. I want to be respectful of Scott's time and yours, everybody that's listening. But here's what I'm going to tell you about Scott Knowles. When I was upset and left my prior provider that I was very vocal about using back in the day and moved to Modgic, I literally sent my termination email and within 30 seconds was on the Modgic website requesting a demo. And in under 5 minutes, I didn't get a call from a virtual professional. I didn't get a call from Scott's sales guy, even though he had one that was selling for him. I got a call from Scott himself that said, look, I understand you're looking to demo the product. He introduced himself as the CEO of Modgic. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. Now I got somebody's attention and we had a great conversation. I'm telling you that because this guy has been in the insurance industry, walked a mile in our shoes. He understands that you have to provide. I get so irritated when we talk about how great our customer service is. Quit talking about that, people. That's the expectation. Okay. You servicing your clients is what you get paid to do. If you do that in some awesome way that's unique that you invented, then by all means brag about it. But if you're getting certificates out in a timely fashion and returning phone calls and emails in a timely fashion, that's your job. I'm sorry. You're not doing anything that's rocket science, but this guy takes the time to make that personal connection on the front end. And I'll be honest with you, it's one of the only reasons that I took his call when he reached out to me about Loss Scan. And the only reason that he's been invited back on the podcast today is because I believe in Scott and what Scott's doing. And I know that this product solves a problem that our industry faces. And I definitely think that if you're out there wondering, like, is this for me? Is this something that I should be looking at? And then tomorrow you're bitching and moaning when you're having to key information in to do an audit on an experience mod or whatever else. Reach out to this guy, see if you can't get a look at what he's doing, get involved in his beta. And when it's ready to roll out, buy the product. I don't get paid a dime for telling you that. Scott, will you verify that? You're not paying me to have you on the podcast to recommend your product.
Not a dime. I'm only going to send you a steak. That's it.
There you go. There you go. So, well, and I'll probably have to give that to somebody else because I'm behaving on my eating plan. I'm doing really, really
no more
good.
Wagyu. No more Wagyu then.
Yeah. Kyle, but you had you had something?
No.
You're raising your hand. You want the steak? Okay.
Yeah.
Kyle can have the steak. But anyhow, Scott, seriously, man, really appreciate you coming on.
I
Appreciate
it too, man.
you reaching out. I appreciate you sharing, the bit that you've shared with me with your user interface and what the back end of the site looks like. Again, I wish you nothing but continued success, but most importantly, I thank you for your friendship, man. I really appreciate the fact that you and I can still have civil conversations and be friendly, even though you had a little bit of a with your exit, it caused me a little bit of a heartache with some people. So we're good. I want to make sure everybody understands that listening to this. So
I appreciate it very much. And David, it's funny you talk about all the different things. I mean, you think about who we work for, right? We work for our families. That's who we work for at the end of the day, and I watch, you as a father, and I told you this the other day, how impressed I am, how you treat your kids and what you do with them and the amount of time that you spend with them. And it's just inspiring, how you're able to bring your kids into this industry because it doesn't, not a lot of people do the things that you've done from that standpoint. So kudos to you for doing those things with your family because, when decisions are made, you make them for them, at the end of the day. And that's what we all focus on. So again, thank you for having me on. It was great to see both you guys again. And, I'd love to get out to Florida here. And as soon as I fix my wrist, I can get back on the golf course and hopefully start throwing some rods.
Awesome. Sounds good. You let me know when, and we'll be ready, my man.
Sounds great. Thanks,
guys. All right, brother. Have a good one. Everybody else, we'll catch you next time. See ya.